Hello and thanks for joining us for this edition of Northwest Newsweek. I'm Mitchell Ringos. Well, OPP now say there is no obvious indication of foul play in the sudden death of 3 men at a home in Hudson near Sioux Lookout. Police and EMS were called to the residence just before 1 o'clock last Saturday afternoon, where they discovered 3 occupants with no vital signs. Postmortems were completed in Toronto, but the specific causes of death will not be released at this time. The investigation is ongoing, and police are asking anyone with information to contact Crime Stoppers or the Sioux Lookout OPP. 1 person has died following a highway crash near Ignace just before midnight Wednesday. The 2-vehicle collision closed the Trans-Canada Highway for more than 10 hours. The crash happened just before midnight in Revel Township, west of Ignace. Eyewitnesses have posted online indicating it was a transport truck and an empty wood chip truck which collided. OPP have confirmed that a 66-year-old Thunder Bay man was pronounced dead at the scene, but there were no other injuries. The highway reopened to alternating traffic at around 10 o'clock Thursday morning, and both lanes reopened just before noon. OPP are asking anyone with information about how the crash occurred to contact police or Crime Stoppers. In the absence of mask mandates, public health officials in the western part of the region are urging the public to take it upon themselves to mask up and prevent the spread of disease. The Northwest Health Unit and a number of hospital CEOs are sounding the alarm about the impact rising cases and respiratory illnesses are having, particularly on ERs and pediatric care. Lee Noonan reports.
With waves of COVID, the flu, and RSV hitting at the same time, public health officials in the western part of the region are imploring the public to protect themselves, each other, and the healthcare system itself by wearing masks, getting vaccinated, and staying home when sick or when there's illness in the home. Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Kit Young-hoon, says the worsening situation could have drastic impacts on the area's healthcare system.
In recent weeks in our region, we have seen a rapid increase in hospitalizations and emergency department visits for respiratory illness, particularly for children. Based on this information, we are facing a potentially difficult winter season. And now is the time to take action to dampen the surge in respiratory illness that is beginning to occur.
With rates of respiratory illness only expected to increase, CEOs of 3 area hospitals spoke up about the impact it could have on hospital capacity.
We are often 1 or 2 sick calls away, either physician or staffing wise, from having to close. So very important to protect our patients and our community and our healthcare providers.
People still have heart attacks and strokes and those sorts of things, accidents and whatnot that need to be cared for. So there has to be capacity in the system to care for the normal things that go on with people outside these, enormous surges of 3, in particular, respiratory illnesses.
You're not going to get mandated, but we would ask you to seriously consider that as a way of protecting you and your families and protecting our capacity, because we do need it for people who require service. And if we get overwhelmed, there will be people who need service that won't get it. And that's what I worry about the most.
In particular, officials are concerned about the health of young children. Reset says the proportion of kids under 16 in his ER has increased from 14% last month to 25% so far in November, mostly with respiratory conditions. Lee Noonan, TBT News.
The Transportation Safety Board has wrapped up its probe into a fatal plane crash near Sioux Lookout in April that killed 4 people, including 2 wanted fugitives. The private plane from BC had fueled up in Dryden and was headed east when it appeared to have zigzagged into the night sky and went down in the thick forest.
The aircraft was totally destroyed when it impacted the treetops. There was a wing tore off. It was there was not much recognizable at the time when we looked at it.
Police in BC confirmed one of the victims, 36-year-old Jean Larkamp, was the #2 most wanted fugitive in the country for murdering a man in Thailand. Another victim was 37-year-old Duncan Bailey from Kamloops, who was facing charges in a different murder. The pilot was identified as 26-year-old Abby Nav Handa of Richmond, BC. The TSB says Handa was not licensed to fly at night, and he also wasn't certified to use flight instruments. PDIN says the inexperience likely contributed to the crash.
If you're under visual flight rules, you're flying with reference to objects on the ground. When it gets dark and there's an absence of light, it gets extremely difficult to do that.
The Chiefs of Ontario are formally supporting the Mattawa Chiefs in asserting sovereignty over the Ring of Fire region. A resolution recognizing the Mattawa First Nations as inherent rights holders and decision makers on any development in Mattawa territory was passed on Wednesday during the Fall Assembly.
Today, government and industry want to come in our lands and take those resources out. Yes, we support development. If it supports us, just as the lands have supported us since time immemorial.
A majority of delegates supported the resolution put forward by the Chiefs of Martin Falls and Constance Lake First Nations. However, there was some pushback from adjacent communities who expressed concerns about the impact development in the Ring of Fire could have downstream in shared watersheds and the impacts of mining transportation corridors through other territories.
I feel left out when I see this because it's going to have a direct impact in my community. We do have overlapping land jurisdiction, and it's important that you recognize other communities that will be directly impacted.
Amendments to the motion were added to acknowledge the potential impact of development on other First Nations and the role they all hold as stewards of the lands and resources. The chief of Gull Bay First Nation is calling for an OPP sergeant to be removed from active service due to a series of human rights complaints. Chief Wilfred King hosted a news conference at Queen's Park this week to shine a light on the allegations, including one from an Indigenous man who says he was dropped off on the side of a barren highway in 2019. Jonathan Wilson reports.
She is a bad apple and she should be removed from the OPP.
Gull Bay Chief Wilfred King held this news conference in Toronto alongside MPP Saul Mamakwa and human rights lawyer Chantal Bryson to outline the claims about a sergeant from the Armstrong OPP detachment. Two of the complaints involve questionable arrests of Gull Bay members. The most serious claim involves Jeremiah Skunk, who was taken into custody after an argument with his girlfriend in the summer of 2019. The sergeant allegedly dropped him off somewhere along Highway 527 between Armstrong and Gull Bay to fend for himself. The OPP have issued a statement saying the sergeant in question has not served in Armstrong since February 2022, no longer resides in the area, and has been assigned to another part of the province.
For us, that is unacceptable. She is still policing, and she poses a constant and danger to not only First Nations people, but all citizens of Ontario.
Although there was an initial responsiveness from Commissioner Carrique to this most serious Starlight Tour complaint involving Mr. Skunk, it then vanished.
Bryson and King say Skunk only received one follow-up phone call from the OPP over a year ago, and Skunk can't recall being told the outcome of any investigation. The OPP won't comment on potential discipline, but the spokesperson says the allegations were investigated by the Professional Standards Unit, and Skunk was notified of the findings. The spokesperson adds that the OPP did provide a response earlier this year to Bryson, who says she only received a one-paragraph email.
The witnesses, including his girlfriend and her mom, and the KZA Constable Edmund King Jr., who found Mr. Skunk, have never been interviewed. So I don't know how you could call that an investigation.
Mamakwa says he wants OPP Commissioner Thomas Carrique to respond to Gull Bay immediately.
If there's no response, we will move up the ladder of the upper echelons of this government, whether it's the Solicitor General, and to be able to respond to these issues. And because we cannot continue to accept racism to be part of the system.
Jonathan Wilson, TBT News.
Up next, 20 years after exposure, Dryden mill workers are still looking for answers.